The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Nodulator Pro, and Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans.
Bernard Tobin here for the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Joined by Rob Miller from BASF. Hey, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
A lot of talk today, these days out there, about Dicamba. We've got Xtend soybeans, Dicamba tolerant soybeans out there, obviously. I want to talk about, in this series, two parts about Dicamba stewardship. And I guess it really comes down to a two-point conversation. That is one about weed management decisions, and one about application. Let's talk in this first part about weed management. I guess it really starts with the fact that you guys have a new formula of Dicamba. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so BASF is launching Ingenia herbicide. It's a new Dicamba formulation. What's different about it versus older formulations is actually a new salt, so it has lower volatility properties. It's not zero volatility, but it has lower volatility properties. Also, the key benefits is that it's a higher concentration for a lower use rate. Monsanto also has another Dicamba formulation available on the market, and only these two technologies and these new chemistries should be used on Roundup Ready 2 Xtends moving forward.
Yeah. Now the big part of the story here is it brings multiple modes of action. Explain about, I guess how it's changing the dynamics.
Yes, definitely. So when we talk about weed management, we always think of not only multiple modes of action, but multiple modes of effective action. So we always want to make sure that we have two modes of action on that target weed. So if you're dealing with glyphosate-resistant Canada fleabane, you always want to make sure that you have two modes of action. So if in Xtend soybeans, you want to make sure that you use the Kicksoar technology in conjunction with Dicamba, because this is great technology. We want to make sure that we use this technology for multiple years to come.
Now, I've talked to a lot of folks here and a lot of discussions about when to get it down. Early, pre-plant, what are you telling people?
Yes, definitely. So we're really targeting on that pre-plant application. That's a two-pronged approach, because if you're dealing with something like Canada fleabane, germinates in the winter, or it's a winter annual, germinates in the fall and also in the spring. So earlier applications, make sure you get those beans off to a clean start, weed-free start, so to maximize your yield potential. We've also been positioning more in that earlier application to avoid off-target movement to neighboring sensitive crops later in the season. So get as much down as you can control those weeds, use multiple modes of effective action, and then only use your Dicamba in crop if need be for controlling some of these tough to control weeds.
Now, let's talk about a little bit about residual. Obviously, the key here is that residual, ability to sort of control weeds, but it can be variable.
Yes, definitely. So when we talk about Dicamba, and residual activity, it depends on the weed species, the rate that's used, the soil type, and the environmental conditions. Dicamba is very water soluble. It moves down the soil profile. So if you get an inch or two of rain right after application, moves down that soil profile, you might be a little bit disappointed in the weed control, and especially in the level of residual activity. Under dry conditions, it actually looks a little bit better. Since it doesn't move down that soil profile, stays in the top couple inches, you actually get a little bit longer residual activity. So when we talk about residual activity, it's anywhere between 1 and 4 weeks. And like I said, it depends on weed species as well. Something like nightshade, not really the strength of Dicamba, especially in terms of residual activity. So that's where you might need to use another mode of action to get you through that critical weed-free period, something that has longer residual and more of a true residual product for that 4-week residual.
Hey, and final thing before we wrap up this section is, a lot of early growth of weeds this year.
Yes.
What do we need to do to manage that situation? We're going to have to put more water in that spread?
Yes, definitely. So for the most part, we've had a pretty mild winter. Some parts of the province haven't even had winter yet, especially in deep southwest. There's very little frost in the ground as well, and the places that have had snow had nice insulation. So what's happening is a lot of those winter annuals, the Canada fleabanes, the chickweeds, the sow thistles, we're starting to see a lot more weed growth this year. And when you look at the top of the plant, it might be fairly large rosette, but it also has a very diverse system. So with some of this new technology, coverage is key. You want to make sure that you use higher water volumes, so 15 to 20 gallons per acre might be required for some of these larger weeds. It's not like Roundup that's fairly systemic that moves down into the roots. Something like Kicksoar as well as Dicamba, more contact herbicides, coverage is key, higher water volumes.
Awesome. So, great chat about weed management strategy. I want to come back for part 2 of this feature and talk about application. How to get it on, how to keep it where you want to put it, right?